architect John Pearson oversaw every detail of the building's design.
Pearson designed what we would call a total work of art, in the sense that not only the physical structure of the building, but the decorative elements, the furnishings, even the organization of space, was all about making sure that people understood what the building's purpose was, why it exists, and what happens in that building. So it is, of course, the space where the legislation of the country is determined, and MPs and senators have this very important role to play, and they need an appropriate space for that work to occur. The Beaux-Arts style is really a 20th century plan, and it's characterized by a hierarchy of space, a simplicity of sense of purpose for the building. So there's a hierarchy in terms of decorative elements, which means that the spaces that are the most important to the understanding of the place warrant the highest decoration and highest design principles. So when you go into center block, you are immediately to understand where you are. You're immediately to understand that everything to your right is related to the Senate, everything to your left is related to the House of Commons, and that there is an order and a structure to the space. So the highest decorated spaces are, for instance, the two speakers' offices, because in a sense it is their house. Then you would think of the chambers, because that's where the most important work happens, and then the Prime Minister's office and the Leader of the Opposition. And then there's an organization to the rooms that are for public functions. But as you go up to higher and higher floors and you get to office spaces, it really looks a lot like any sort of typical 20th century building of the time. There's a pragmatism to the way that decor is used. There's a choice of finishes. The sort of what we call the noblest materials are used in the most important places. So the kinds of wood, the kinds of marble, everything is conceived to give you a sense of this place and understanding. So as much as possible, Canadian, or at the very least North American, materials were used in the space to remind people of the places in which they come from to gather in Ottawa in these two chambers.
Pearson also included several themes that run through the entire building. One of the most integral is the ship of state metaphor. Here in Center Block's main entrance, the figure of Poseidon is carved into the central column of Confederation Hall. Poseidon is the ancient Greek god of the seas, storms, and earthquakes.
And then there is what's called a rose compass, and using the marble on the floor, there's a view of the sea, the land, and then ultimately the cosmos. And the idea, again, is this metaphor of the ship of state. The idea that no matter how rocky times might be, there is essentially order in good governance, and there is always somebody steering the ship and central to the helm. And when you're in the Prime Minister's office, there are nautical decorative elements throughout, because of course the Prime Minister is steering the ship. And throughout the building, there are little touches related to either fish or sea creatures or things that remind you of this metaphor. So the idea is that when you walk through the building, there are things that you'll see at the beginning, but you'll see them as you go through. And it's a way that you can be constantly reminded of these narratives about who we are, what we're doing in this place, what this place means to the kind of underpinnings and structure of our country and our democracy.